Is the stock market going to crash in 2021? Today we're coming up with a plan to prepare for the end of the year. Should we go long on stocks or should we sell stocks? Breaking it down right here, right now, looking at the chart and comparing 2018, 2019, 2020, and now 2021. Let's get prepared for the end of 2021 in the stock market. What's going on, guys? Patrick here, and well, today we're talking about my favorite thing, and that's the stock market. We're taking a look at the overall SPY. We're going to look at levels. We're going to look at some patterns on the chart for September, October, and we're going to try to predict which way the stock market is going to go here in 2021 towards the end of the year. Should I be long the SPY or should I be buying puts? Let's just dive into the chart and kind of get a better idea of what's going on. All right. So we just pulled up the chart here on the SPY. If you're wondering what EMAs I'm using on the TradingView website, you can add the Ripster EMA clouds. It's very simple. You just go to the indicators and you type in Ripster EMA clouds. I've been using them a lot. I've been loving them. I think they're really easy to see the overall trend, to see where those EMAs are, and give you a better idea. Get a little bit more wiggle room than just one fine line, but more of using a cloud to give you an understanding of where that support is. And basically, looking here at the chart, you can see how well the SPY does follow those overall clouds, and especially for buying the dip here. If you're looking for key levels to buy the dip, well, you're looking at okay, there's that EMA cloud, we got this support EMA cloud down there, and right now we are kind of running that fine line between support and resistance, wondering which way this is going to go. The one thing that we always know, that we've always talked about since day one, every single day trader, no matter if you're just started or if you've been doing it for 10 years. Hey, if you guys enjoy my videos and you want to learn more about NFTs and cryptocurrency, make sure you check out my new channel. I'll be giving away free NFTs worth some serious money all the time on the channel. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. There's a link down below. Check out the new channel. Let's get back into my predictions here. It's like a common rule that gaps always get filled. And this is perfect example of that. We had this big gap down the other day. You can see the gap between 440 and 435. It did not fill instantly. Don't get me wrong. It doesn't always fill, the day after or the day of. It ended up taking, 1, 2, 3, 4 days to fill that gap, but it ended up filling the gap. And what's really interesting here, kind of proving the idea of the gap getting filled, is that even though this gap was filled and we thought oh wow, it's gonna just gonna rally back, the overall trend stayed the same. So we had the gap down, breaking down the trend, breaking through support. We've refilled that gap, or we filled that gap, retesting that overall downtrend, and then we had another big sell-off back to that support area. So it's very interesting, kind of always seeing how these gaps affect the overall price action. And again, we had a big gap here from the 441 area down there to 440. So guess what happened? Again, we filled that gap. This little candle right here, the high on this candle that day was 441. The low on that candle was 441.90. So we basically filled that gap there on the chart. And now guess what's happening? We are continuing to go lower following that overall trend. So what happens now, Patrick? What is going to happen now with the overall market? Well, guess what? Once again, we have a gap in the chart here. And what do we know? What do we know, people? That the gap, there's a very good chance that this gap is once again wanting to get filled. And well, we should expect a pullback here over the next week. We should expect a pullback over the next week. We should expect some consolidation. The question is, do we pull back to this 430 level, the 428, or do we put in a higher low kind of at this 432 area here if we fill the gap, maybe 434? So 434, 432, 430, 428 area, this is a very key area of support, and we obviously, see that right there as support. And I think there's definitely very, something going on with that 430 level, and it looks like, people are definitely buying the bounce off of that level. We had multiple days bouncing off that 428 level, and that kind of lines us up perfectly with previous, resistance and support kind of in this level as well. So very interesting always to see kind of where support and resistance, where it interacts with the price action and how the price action interacts with that. But it's one thing to draw lines on charts, but let's look at some of the previous years for September and October to see, what's the normal pattern for the end of the year here for the SPY in the overall market. So if we go back to 2019 here, guess what? This is September. We had an all-time high beginning of September in 2020 here. We pulled back the middle of September. We then rallied up here to the 352 area. And then guess what? What's so interesting here is that we pulled back again. We pulled back. We had a gap in the chart. We filled the gap. And then we're off to the races. So here's the question now. Does this kind of play out very similar to how this worked before? What was the rise? I want to see what the percentage gain is towards the end of the year here as well. So if we go ahead and we measure this out from the low being there, and then we measure out towards the end of the year, the 31st of December, that's around a 16% move. So let's just say realistically a 12 to 10% move is kind of what we would be looking for towards the end of the year. Because if we go back here and we look again, let's look at 2019 here. And guess what? 2019, same exact move. September, we had the dip. We had a push back up. We had another dip there in October, the beginning of October. And then we were off to the races. And guess what? Look how big this move was there in 2019 towards the end of the year. Let's go December 31st. And that all-time, or that push there was 12%. So we're pretty much right in line to think that there's a very, very good possibility of a 10% move here. Now, the one thing that I do want to kind of talk about here is there obviously is a downside move as well. There's always the upside, the downside. And this is how it played out in 2018. I believe there was something going on in 2018. There was, some more issues with the overall market and the news. I forgot exactly why the market crashed there in 2018, but you can see it ended up rallying right back there. There was something going on. I forgot exactly what the reason was for that crash, but we had that big dip. And if we measure that one out, let's just say we measure it from basically breaking through that support, which would be that 430 area we have now. How far down do we dip from that level? And we dipped down around 10%, 9% there towards the end of the year. So we can see that in general, there's normally around a 10% move from October to the end of the year. And that's good for us because we need to look at options and we need to look at okay, do I want to be buying options based on the idea that the market might move 10 to 12% towards the end of the year here for the SPY? And the same thing looking at, guess what? Once again, going back till 2017 here, you can see in September, we had a little bit of a dip there, a little bit of volatility there, September, October. And then how much did we rally? This was insanity right here. Look at this. So we'll go from this low here in September and then towards the end of the year, right around 8% there, but you can see it ended up rallying much larger than that all the way up into January. So that rally can obviously continue into January here, but just for my personal, belief here or idea, if I'm going to be buying these options, I'm kind of looking at December, possibly January, but probably I'm going to be looking at December. It really comes down to the overall price. And the other day I was looking at those 450 calls on the SPY. The 450 calls that expire at the end of December, they're trading around $3.50 right now. And I believe that if we do get a nice little pullback here, back down to this 430, 428 area, those 450 calls are going to look very, 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 very tasty towards the end of the year here. And it's really based, this trade is very simple for me. This trade is like rock steady or rock hard in terms of how simple this is to kind of lay it out. If the 430 area holds, then I should expect a 10 to 12, possibly a 15% move. There's a lot of people a lot of analysts putting numbers out that we should see, 450 by the end of the year. So we're going to go like this all the way up to, there's a lot of analysts believing that we should see 500 by the end of the year. So that would put us all the way up there. And that's going to obviously be a huge move. But the idea is that there's still a lot of money on the sidelines here waiting towards the end of the year. That's a 16% move. So if we let's just say, realistically, we go for a 12 to 10% move. Let's just say 10%, because that way anything above that is going to be, money in the bank. So we'll say 470, so $20 over all-time highs. So if I buy those 450 calls for around $2 to $3, and we get a move up to the 470 area, well, then that would make, I'd make around $15 in profit off of the premium there on those calls. If we get a move to 500, I'd be making $40 to $50 on those calls, which would be insanity. So I think this is just a really kind of A+ trade in terms of the overall setup. The risk to reward is very, very simple and easy to see here. If that 430 area can't hold, well then, like I said, that 10% move the downside is very possible based on what we've seen with the overall moves the downside. And that would put us around, I'd say, like 380 by the end of the year, which would also kind of correlate with this support area and consolidation level as well, at that 380 area. So, it's kind of interesting to look at it and obviously measure these moves out because, you're looking at 11% move to the downside being 380 area being the support towards the end of the year. And then you're looking at it like, okay, well, if we push to the upside here, we're looking at around a 10% move. Okay, and then we're pushing over 470. If we get a 16% move, we're pushing up there to the 500s, which a lot of people believe that the SPY will just kind of go to all-time highs, squeeze through all-time highs, go to the moon here, and just kind of rocket from there. So if you look at the overall idea of what's going on right now, the Fed, the government, everybody just kind of needs the market to keep going higher. It's just this idea that stocks kind of always go higher. If you look at the overall chart here on the SPY, it's always gone higher. We've had big dips, and then we've had big pops, and it's just kind of the way the world works. But the question is, at what point, a lot of people are wondering, at what point does the market actually crash and really, 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 really crash? I just don't believe that going into the end of this year that we're going to see a major crash. If it's going to happen, I would kind of say that it would be, the beginning of next year. Because if you look, overall at some of the charts here, we had that big move with Corona that dropped in February. If you look, further back at some of the selling, a lot of that selling and volatility comes around September, October. So that'll be very interesting to see, weekly wise, the chart doesn't look as bad as when you look at the daily chart. And on the weekly chart, it's looking very good for a, continuation of consolidating here at the 430 level and then getting that breakout. So basically just like this, we get a little bit of consolidation this next week. We get the deal with the extending the debt ceiling and everything, all the stuff going on with Congress, that gets done. They're going to have everything done, beginning of November, end of October. So we'll get a little bit of volatility here, and then it's off to the races, and then we push up to the 500. So I think this is a cut and dry, just very simple and beautiful trade setup for me, kind of watching to see where we consolidate over the next week. The SPY, there's huge opportunity here. If the market consolidates, we get this beautiful pullback, we keep bouncing off that 430 level, well, then 500 at the end of the year. And the thing is like if I buy the 450 calls and we push to 460, that's still good money. That's still really good money. We push to 470, that's like, we killed it. We push to 500, we're retiring at that point on those calls. So that's really kind of the way I'm looking at it. And I think the risk to reward is so good here. And the risk really, we're getting such a good area. If we get this, pullback again to that 430 level, and we know that there's so much support there, and it continues to hold, obviously, then that would give us such a good risk to reward here. And well, at the end of the day, obviously this is not financial advice, but this is what I'm going to do. And this is what I'm definitely watching right now for a beautiful setup to really crush it towards the end of the year here. And I think you just can't really lose on this setup as long, as this 430 layer level holds. If we can't hold 430, obviously I would, it would be obviously if 430 can't hold, well then, like I said, that 10% move the downside is possible, which at that point, maybe we switch to puts and then we can buy, some 400 puts at that point. We get down to the 380 area. Well, then that'll be beautiful towards the end of the year. But I think overall that the setup here will kind of end up doing this in general, and we're going to get that push, up to the 480, 450. I don't want to say 500 because I feel like that's just a little insane to say, but, it's just like this magical number. And I think there's definitely something about, numbers and like we said, just the whole number, the idea of the SPY being 500 towards the end of the year, and we'll see what happens. But that's my overall way of looking at it. I know there's a lot of stuff going on, with debt and all these problems, but we also, we've seen this so many times. Every single year, people come out and they start freaking out saying, oh, the market's going to crash. There's too much debt. There's all these problems, blah, blah. It's always an issue. But for some reason, it just always gets worked out and the market just keeps going higher and higher because at the end of the day, where else can you really put your money to work? And these big funds that are kind of sitting, I think there's still a lot of cash sitting on the sidelines waiting to see if the market's going to hold that 430 level because knowing that you can get a 10% to 15% move towards the end of the year, if that 430 level can hold, that's going to create a lot of FOMO, and there's going to be a lot of people trying to buy because they're seeing it like, wow, the same way I'm looking at it. If I'm not a genius here by any means, if I'm looking at it like this, there's a lot of other people that are looking for the same exact setup. And that's one thing that gives me confidence as well, because if this setup does work, it's going to create massive FOMO and everybody's going to want to get in on it. So there's my breakdown. That's what I'm thinking is going to go on. And that's my overall plan. Buying 450 calls for the end of the year. I think it's just a beautiful, beautiful trade setup here. And we'll see what happens. So if you guys haven't already, do me one big favor. Hit that like button, subscribe button, all those buttons down below. I will talk to you guys later on.